Presently, our country and the nations of the world are being faced with a swine flu pandemic, which is being reported in the media as an illness that can potentially kill millions. It is estimated that 90,000 in our country alone will die from this virus, not mentioning the hundreds of thousands that will die from the swine flu vaccination, which contains 1,000,000 times more squalene than that which was found in vaccination A, which was a vaccination that caused Gulf War syndrome, which thousands of our country's veterans are still dealing with today. In preparation for the swine flu outbreak, the National Guard has begun doing training exercises, preparing for the riots that they foresee taking place at vaccination clinics because of the limited supply of vaccinations.
In the town of South Paris, dozens of National Guard troops dressed in riot gear spent the day fighting off angry crowds desperately trying to get their hands on vaccinations against the H1N1 flu. At least that's what it all looked like. This was a drill, however, for guardsmen in the event of a swine flu pandemic. Steve Minnick has more from Oxford Hills High School.
Now, what you see here is a situation these National Guardsmen and police hope they never have to deal with. But there is the possibility, since Oxford Hills High School is a dispensing point for the vaccination.
During riots, you know, hey, there's the medicine, we want it now. They're going to overwhelm the local PDs.
It's a what-if worst-case scenario. What if local police were not enough to quell crowds of people so panicked to get a flu shot they turn violent? Well, that is when they'd call in the National Guard.
The National Guard at this very time has begun accepting applications for internment resettlement specialists, which is a fancy title for concentration camp guards. These concentration camps will be called quarantine facilities to control the spread of this illness called the swine flu, and will also be used as holding centers for those that are not willing to comply with government orders. These topics were discussed on August 19th through 21st of this year, 2009, in Washington, D.C., at an international swine flu conference that received absolutely no mention whatsoever on any news network. And if you are not sure if this swine flu virus is worthy of being taken seriously, the Senate of Massachusetts just passed a new law requiring mandatory vaccinations.
So in Massachusetts, the legislature is acting rapidly on a bill updating what the state can do at a public health emergency. That bill has languished on Beacon Hill for some time, but with the flu outbreak, it's now racing through the legislature. NECN's Josh Brugadier is at the State House in Boston tonight. Josh?
RD, the state Senate passed this bill, Bill 2028 today. They did so unanimously, and it gives the governor and the health commissioner the power to act in the public's interest in case in any kind of medical emergency. Timing sped up a hearing and ultimately unanimous Senate approval of the Pandemic and Disaster Preparation and Response Bill in Massachusetts. The bill gives the Public Health Commissioner the discretion to respond to an outbreak like the kind going on in Mexico, to close or evacuate buildings, enter private property, isolate or quarantine people, and to get and distribute meds and vaccines. A registry of Massachusetts volunteers would be created and would be activated in case of emergency. Plus, the commissioner could request personnel from other states. The bill also protects healthcare workers from liability. Concerns about the spread of swine flu meant lawmakers, such as Worcester County Democrat Richard Moore, didn't want to take any chances.
It's too bad that we have to have something like that pending to get us to finally act, but this was actually on the calendar before that became a news story, so it's not that it's totally there, but it does give us another reason why it's a good idea to have this on the books.
NRD, the bill has actually passed the Senate a couple times the past few years, but has never passed both the Senate and the House. The House is expected to take up the bill sometime this week.
Josh, any penalty if you don't follow the emergency declaration rules?
It can actually get to be a pretty severe penalty, because for each day someone didn't follow a rule, for example, if somebody was asked to be quarantined and they decided not to follow that, it could be a fine of up to $1,000 per day they didn't follow, and also up to 30 days in prison.
And remember, when one state makes a law of this nature, especially a state like Massachusetts, it sets a legal precedent for other states to pass similar laws that will allow for similar actions and similar punishments. And while all of these horrible health-related, chaotic scenarios are on the horizon, Jay-Z's #1 fan, President Barack Obama, is pushing for the approval of a health care plan as if it was dependent upon his very own life. Is not all of this just a little bit strange? If not, then what about this? In Jay-Z's #1 fan's healthcare plan, he is seeking to eliminate waste expenditures. In other words, he wants healthcare providers to come up with more effective ways of dealing with our health problems without doing multiple blood work, multiple scans, and multiple expensive pills being given out that may not necessarily be needed to deal with our health situation. And can you just imagine, with this swine flu on the rise and the more than real possibility of there being a record number of overcrowded emergency rooms all over our country, when there are only a limited amount of vaccinations available, and not to mention that our country is still on the brink of an economic failure, this can turn out to be a pretty nasty situation. Unless the government had an alternative solution to offer the desperate citizens of America, which will literally be on the ends of their seat for any option that could possibly spare their life from being snuffed out by this rapidly mutating virus. Well, on May 6th of 2009, which is this year, VACCINATIon and Receptors LLC started developing what could possibly be the government's alternative solution. You see, on May 6th, VACCINATIon and Receptors LLC began developing a microchip the size of a grain of rice that has a sensor that can detect biological threats such as the swine flu. In their statements about this piece of technology, they specify that it has been created for the purpose of dealing with an outbreak of a pandemic. And the best quote-unquote advantage of this chip is that it can eliminate waste expenditures on multiple blood tests and scans because it has the capability of pinpointing with exactness whatever toxin may be causing an individual's illness. Now, is it me, or does this piece of technology fit really good with Obama's healthcare plan, which he is trying to get passed in a mad frenzy? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that it could be a possibility that Jay-Z's #1 fan, President Obama, who also happens to be a 33rd degree Freemason, do you think it could be possible that he would inform his fellow brother Mason of illness, darkness, and war that is on the horizon? Maybe, or maybe not. But really, maybe.